with that song, Joy in the Heavens, made me feel a little bit like spring, which is very different than the temperature right now, which feels very much like winter. And it's interesting how some little change of the mind can make everything different. Some little shift, some little a different way of looking at things, and suddenly everything's different. And one of the reasons that's true is because when we think of things differently, the energy changes. Everything in life is energy. Underneath energy is consciousness. When we change the energy, we change our consciousness. This is why we practice pranayama. Pranayama is energy control. We use the mind to direct the breath and to simultaneously direct the energy. And when we redirect the energy in a new way, we actually create a powerful change. And this is something that, a subject that comes up at this time of the year, end of the year. We look back at the year and think, well, how did it go? And then we think, now what do I want to do to improve this coming year? It's a new start. But the thing is that anytime we shift the energy in our consciousness, it's a new moment. It's a new day. It's a new life. And this is the key thing to understand about improving ourselves. We want to make resolutions in the new year about doing things better. But we have to understand that it has to come in our consciousness most strongly first. This is one of the reasons we practice affirmation, is we learn to use the power of the word to change the direction of energy in our lives, in our consciousness. And this we've seen so many examples of this in the lives of the masters, in our experience of Ananda through the years, where whether it be Master or Sruteshwar or Grinandaji, they would very strongly present a new idea, a new direction, and then that statement, that powerful statement of new direction, would create a following change. I remember there was, I'm trying to think, it must have been in the 80s, and Swamiji had written a new course called Super Conscious Living. And we had this big launch of the Super Conscious Living course in San Francisco. And we rented the Palace of Fine Arts, which was a big hall. We'd never done anything quite so big before that. And very surprisingly, a few of us were standing near Swamiji before he came into the hall, and suddenly he turned to us. There was a group of ministers there, and said, "Okay, now I want you all to get in a line and file in, and then I'm going to come in after you." And it was like, well, wait a minute, we don't want to do any filing. We'll just sneak in the back, and sit, But no, he was making a statement, and you said, well, who was he making the statement to? Was it to the people who came? Was it to us? Was it to the universe? It was all of those things at the same time. Most powerfully, it was to the universe. There are times when we stand up and we say, because God has made us aware, that awareness flowing through us is saying, in this moment, may this be true. This is true. And when we stand up, and I think about that experience, and it changed us. This group of people, we always thought of ourselves as, we're just disciples. We're and unworthy, mostly. but darn lucky, and proof of God's compassion because we're here, and yet it represented a consciousness shift in us, and this we found time and time again is that Swamiji's actions would be precipitated by this act of energy, this act of personal commitment, this standing up and saying, now we're doing this. And it wasn't ego. It wasn't like, and don't you dare question, or don't you dare stand against us, we'll knock you down. There's nothing like that. It was like spring. It was this joy in the heavens. It's like when the seeds sprout and the flowers come out of the ground. They're not fighting the world. They're exalting the world. They're just saying, "Oh yeah." They're not against anybody. They're just for the vibrancy, the excitement, the truth that life itself is its own statement. And when we get into that consciousness, then we can change our lives. Yoganandaji taught that it takes 7 years to create a habit. And yet, he also said that you can create a habit right here, right now, in a day. By using the strength of will. Whose will? God's will through your individualized will. And this is really what the spiritual life is about in so many ways, is attuning ourselves to God's will and empowering it by our own personal commitment to cooperation with that greater power. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to cooperate with what God is trying to do through our consciousness. But if we think, oh, well, the little I is going to make a change, it's tough. But when you think that the power of God through this form, then all bets are off on what can be accomplished. That you can accomplish, if he had but faith, he could move mountains. This is where this comes from, is there's no limit to the kind of change that we can make in our lives and in the world when we align our efforts with God's efforts. This is one of the greatest mistakes that people make when they try to become successful outwardly in life, is they think, I have to make this happen. I am going to do this. And yes, there is the power of the ego, and we have certain karmic, because of our karma, we have accessibility to energies that we have been connected to in the past. But if we live only by the little I and the karma of the past, we're putting a great limit on what we can accomplish. If we allow life itself, if we partner with life itself, if we allow the universal potential to flow through us, then so much more can happen. And in ways that we can't fully imagine. Most of the great discoveries in science and the inspirations in art have come from moments of inspiration that were then followed by a lot of hard work. And those moments of inspiration are times when, for whatever reason, the mind and the consciousness of that individual was opened up to a greater potential. And as yogis, what we want to do, we are given a specific understanding and process to do this. To do this consciously, not to wait until, wow, I don't know where this came from, but the other day I came up with this new idea. We want to consciously attune ourselves to in this process every year, every month, every day, every moment. Every moment when we're living, we want to make our inner connection, our consciousness, an affirmation of our relationship to universal potential, to God, to Spirit. And then we want to, when we make a decision, so if the commander-in-chief of the army says, okay, he says, okay, everybody get ready, and he says, okay, charge, and everybody goes, whoo, all together. When we get that inner command, we have to gather all of the forces of our enthusiasm, of our willpower, and then we rush out, and not with blind eyes, not with, you still have to be able to maneuver in the field as you're rushing forth, but you have to give it that level of commitment, that 100% affirmation of willingness to participate and to recognize that God is doing this through us. And we think about Ananda's history, and you go back to Yoganandaji at Mount Washington. It was an act of will. It's so easy to think that Master was sent to the West by Babaji and Jesus and given this great mission. Therefore, basically, it's like you get a ticket, you get on the train, and the train goes. And all you have to do is sit there. It's a done deal. You know, as long as you get on the train, you're going to end up where you're going. But if you've all been on the trains in India, it's not as simple as just sitting down. There's always an adventure that takes place when you get on the train. And this is the way life is. There's always an adventure involved. And I remember reading this article about this train that was going from one place to another, and somehow it got the track switching was done improperly, and it ended up going off, and it literally disappeared for quite a while. And it took days. It was like nobody knew where it was, and it was gone. But of course, like all Indian driving, it doesn't, it eventually came back. It found its way back to where it was trying to get to. And what surprised me is in the articles, it's like nobody was really very bothered by it. In America, we would have gotten the army involved, and everybody in the country searching for the train. What could have happened? Aliens took it away. Who knows what? But when Master came to the West, it was an adventure. It was, and he had to activate this divine energy flow through his consciousness. Yes, it was God's will that this take place, but God works through channels. God has made the creation and individualized his expression through each and every part of the creation, and given those each and every part of the creation the choice whether to go for the little I or the big I, to go for the ego and self-indulgence, or for the higher self, divine self-expression. And we want to look at our lives and recognize that if we want something, we can't just put our feet up and think, well, it's going to come to me. It's true that once you have the thought for any desire, it will come to you. But if it's a weak desire and a big, a big desire, then it might take you 1,000 incarnations to get that desire fulfilled. And you're thinking, wow, do I really want to invest 1,000 incarnations in, being the CEO of a company? That's a lot. That's a big commitment of time. And then you think about all of the desires that we have, and how long we end up taking to fulfill those desires. This is why it takes so long to free ourselves. But through the power of will, we can make a conscious change. And isn't this amazing? In one practice of Kriya Yoga, you can get the same effect as if you'd lived in complete harmony with life for a year. The natural positive influences of having lived in complete harmony with the creation, with God's positive expression of life, in one breath, conscious breath. This is a complete game changer when we realize how much power is accessible to us to create change, to create the life that we seek to live, even if that life is a worldly life, to create success outwardly. And then most importantly, to create the positive change in our consciousness that leads to the joy and the love of spirit. This fulfillment that comes from the inside that can be there for us no matter what happens on the outside. We keep thinking, oh, if I just get my weight down, I'll be happy. Oh, there was a study Swamiji quoted about a study in America was done, and people were asked about their level of happiness, and then it was if they could just get 10% more income than they had, they would be happy. This consciousness, I just need 10% more. I just need a little more. I just need this. I just need that. Oh, it's not a big thing. Just this living with a constant idea that I need something more to be happy. Well, it's true. We do need something more, but it's not something from outside. It's something from inside. It's a shift in the way that we relate to the process of being happy. We have to shift to the idea that we don't need to wait for God to be present in our lives. We don't need samadhi to be happy. Yeah, samadhi will be... You know what I meant. But there is a lot of happiness that comes before infinite happiness. I mean, there's a lot. That's a big, that's a wide range there that we can work with. And it's so much greater than what we have thought was available to us. And it simply takes this shift of awareness and the recognition that we have to activate it through the power of our will. We have to say yes. Swamiji had this saying. He said, "Say yes to life." And this saying yes to life was not say yes to drinking beer and having a good time. That's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying say yes to being egotistical. He wasn't saying yes to stepping on top of others in order to gain success for yourself. He was saying say yes to that essential component of life, which is bliss, which is happiness. And the act of saying it, we have to say it. We have to say yes to God. We have to say yes to all of the positive things that we seek, whether they be inward or outward. And then, of course, if you think about, the opposite of yes is no. So, but how is it that people aren't saying, no, I don't want to be happy. No, I don't want to be happy. But in a way they are, because what they're doing is they've become distracted in their consciousness from the yes. And so the energy that's available to us, in two things that happens. One is that the amount of energy available to us is limited, because we don't practice our accessing it. And then the other is that we waste it. distribute it in non-productive directions. We let it oftentimes unconsciously go into the no-saying side. So we don't realize that we're actually pushing things away because we're not being fully attentive. I've talked about this before, but I think it's a subject that is, we have to remind ourselves to be more aware of what's going on around us and how it is affecting us, but also how we are affecting it. So a very easy place to realize this is driving. When you're out on the roads, how are the actions of others affecting me? And then, how are my actions affecting others? So if you look at drivers, you know, if it's behind them, they don't see it. It doesn't exist to them. So they've just hit the brakes quickly, suddenly, swerved to the side unexpectedly, and they're not thinking, oh, you know, there might be somebody behind me. In America, we're trained to, you know, check the rearview mirror, check the side, look behind you, look, and then go. But I was just absolutely shocked when I got in the car when I came back to India in 2005, and we had the Sangha car and the driver, and he came to a busy street, the main street. We're coming from a side street, and he got to the corner. He didn't look. He didn't slow down. He just, you know, he just went. And I, oh, you know. But this is what happens: is we don't realize. The thing is that when I tried to convince him to pay more attention, that almost caused an accident. He was so stuck in his own system, he couldn't, you know. And it was a very clear example of how the process of expansion of consciousness takes place. That we begin to perceive more than we had perceived before. It's not. We think of education as being more information. You do receive more information, but that greater information doesn't come from memorizing a list of new words. It becomes because instead of only being able to see in front, you begin to be able to see in back. That idea that people that guy has eyes in the back of his head. And many times my kids would, when they were growing up, I could just see, I call it the cogs turning in their minds. And I would then tell them what they were thinking, and they go, what happened? How did he do that? Because I could inwardly reach out and perceive, what would it be like if I was this person in this place in this time? What would I be perceiving? And I wasn't always right, but I was right a lot of the time. And the thing is, you need to inwardly reach out and perceive more. So you see, when I go to the walking on the streets or in one of the shopping areas, and there's aisles, and the aisles are generally quite packed and narrow, and yet people will, in the middle of the aisle, they'll stop. And they're not trying to be mean. They're not thinking, oh, you people in behind me, I'm more important than you are. They don't even think about that there's people behind them. But there are, and those actions are having an effect on all kinds of stuff behind. People who drive unsafely often cause accidents, not to themselves, but to the people that they've just gone on by. And so when we relate to life, we need to expand our perception about how our actions are affecting others, and on ever deeper levels, how our actions are affecting us. We don't always pay attention to the side effects of our actions. So we're doing this, and we have a good intention, so we go ahead and we do this. But we don't necessarily realize how that is going to affect others. And sometimes we think that the way that we affect others, we see the surface way that we affect others, and we don't take the time to perceive the deeper way that we affect others. For example, if let's take a kind of an extreme example. So let's take one of the important spiritual holidays of the year. We just had Christmas. So we think about Christmas time, and that although Christmas is not as a powerful holiday here in India, it's still a family time. And so how much time do I give to the family Christmas in relationship to how much I give to the outward family versus the spiritual family? If you live in a Nayaswami community, although I was going to say that that's not as big a problem, but it can still be a problem. As families grew up, if you're single, okay, let's start Christmas early in the morning. But if you have a family, you want to do the family Christmas and then come to the community Christmas. So we began to shift things so that both the smaller groups and the larger groups could be accommodated. But what if a person's family relationships, in order to fulfill them, they then withdraw from their spiritual family. And they think, oh, I am giving these people more energy. I would rather go to the spiritual family, but I'm going to sacrifice myself and stay here. And I'm thinking, I'm really being selfless. But if you really look at that situation, you have to consider the possibility that by not energizing yourself, by not drawing in the spiritual power of this special spiritual occasion, you may actually be weakening the family rather than strengthening it. And a lot of times, parents have to say to their kids, look, I know that you don't like this nutritive foods here, these vegetables, but you got to eat them. It's good for you. Or you haven't been feeling well. You need to take your vitamins. That will help you to grow healthy, or to do some activity that maybe you don't. Maybe your child is tends to be what we'll call a bookworm. Stay at home and go outside and get some exercise. We think that, and we'll impose that on them. But they're going, I know better than you what I need. And I don't need to do that. But as a parent, you much of the time you realize, no, I really do know more about this than you maybe realize. And we look at that spiritually, and we recognize that our friends and family may not always recognize, and we may not always recognize what's best for us. And we have to begin to, as our consciousness expands, and when I say expand, it means that you can achieve deeper levels of understanding about, right action for you. And that these situations, they're not, always this or always that. But the principle is involved. What's the principle? Seek ye first the kingdom of God. When we put God first, then everything else in life aligns. And in amazing ways. Where if we always put the world first, even the doing good in the world, we may cut ourselves off of a greater potential. And remember, what would you do for your family, your friends, your community, your world, your part of the galaxy, and even your enemies? You would give them love, joy, freedom, the power to understand good and to act in good ways. And what's the most powerful way that we can give that to others is to live it through our own lives. We have to do it first. You want your child to eat the vegetables? Take a bite. So we say this, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And when we do that, even though in the short term we may create, other people may be saying, oh, you're making a selfish decision, only thinking of yourself. Yeah, my higher self. And my higher self will bless you. When you become free, the power of that freedom is distributed out into all of those that you're close to. That's the legacy that you give them. When people pass from this world, they write in their will, okay, I give the picture in the living room to the son or the daughter, and I'll leave the house to the 3 kids. They can arm wrestle for it, and all of the items you them. But when the saints pass from this world, their legacy is not paintings and buildings and bicycles and automobiles. It's the power of the light. It's their realization. When Rajasi achieved freedom, Master gave him the gift. He says, I give you half of my realization. Wow. We can't even fully understand what that means, but it's got to be incredible. And then he gave it. And you see this you read about this in the old histories. The kings, I'll give you up to half my kingdom, for this one thing. And you're going, wow, that's incredible. That's really huge. And Master gave half of his realization to Rajasi. Wow! That's just unfathomable. When we give our lives to God, and that doesn't mean we don't interact with the world and fulfill our responsibilities in the most responsible way. That's the thing that people don't get. It's the most responsible way. But this takes an act of will. So whether we're talking about New Year's resolutions or the choices that we make on a daily and an hourly basis in life, we have to come back to this act of will. Act of will. And remember that the act of will, rather than being powered by the ego, has to become powered by God. This is when we say God's will. I want to live according to God's will. It's we want to attune ourselves, grow our perception of what it is that God is trying. If you think of your life as a flower, what kind of flower is God trying to live through each and every one of us? It's a multifaceted thing, but it's something we begin to perceive more and more of it. But what we won't, in human terms, be able to anticipate and see all of it perfectly. Master, even as an avatar, when he took on the form of a personality, then he limited his ability to know what to do and when to do it. He could, of course, ask any question and receive an answer, But he didn't always ask. You know, he attuned himself, well, Lord, what are we trying to do now? Rather than getting the program ahead of time. And saying, okay, we have to, you know, it says here we have to turn left. He lived in that moment. And we do the same. And that's part of the way that God wants it to be. This makes it a challenge. If we had really clear instructions all the time, it would be a very different experience. But so we have to, in conscious attunement to as much of God's perception of this moment as we can, align ourselves with it. And the way that we do that on deeper and deeper levels is to make that commitment. And it's a time commitment. If you want to be better at anything in life, anything that you choose to do, you're going to have to spend time doing it. You may have a natural ability which makes it easier for you than others. But even people with great natural ability don't achieve their highest potential unless they give it that additional attention, that additional commitment, that time spent in training, in discipleship. And so, as we look back at this year, if we look and try to evaluate, well, how has it gone? What have I done? Then you can look at milestones. So and so was born. So and so passed. You know, if you look at the news, you'd think that the most important thing in life was the fashions that were successful and accepted, and the fashions that were the worst fashions of the year, the best movie of the year, the worst movie of the year. You know, all of this stuff, which in the light of spiritual potential, is like, come on, that's just really not. And it's not that you can't, you know, be interested in fashion or any other thing. It's that you have to keep it in its place. But the problem is that we are so distracted by all that stuff that we only see that and we don't see God's presence. And then we think that God is hard to perceive. And we sort of blame, look, Lord, if you made yourself a little bit more presentable, easy to see, then, you know, this wouldn't be such a problem. So really, it's your fault. And you can always blame God. Yes, God made the creation. It is God's fault. But in the end, God, through us, has to decide to turn the tables, turn the circumstance and go, okay, in spite of the fact, Lord, that you made it this way, and that had you consulted me, or if I could remember being consulted, then I hope I would have told you to shift it slightly, well, at least in my, you know, for me, you know. But when we make that shift in our consciousness, then everything changes. And the idea that God is distant is dissolved. We think that God is distant, but God is present. Even though we can't see all of God, we can see some of God. Each and every one of us has been touched by God. Maybe not the way Babaji's been touched, but we've been touched. And that touch is the most true thing that we've ever experienced. And we have to trust that. And we have to remember it and increase it. Commit ourselves to it. And so, yes, evaluate the year. Make your resolutions for the new year. Good luck with that. Kree recommends that you don't make too many resolutions. And make it something that you can do and then increase it. Don't go for the moon and then do nothing. You know, because that's not practical. The gyms, the gymnasiums love the new year. They get a lot of new sign-ups, but they hate So they love January, but they don't like February. Because by February, everybody's like, maybe next year. So we need to recognize that success in life, change in life, the accomplishment of everything that we want in life takes energy. And energy flows through the act of will. And it comes from the divine. And this is why it's so important to practice the energization exercises. We teach them in the beginning, and they seem only like, exercise, calisthenics, no big deal. It's easy to forget the essential principles that we're learning how to be aware of energy from the inside out and to consciously direct it through an act of will. And if you can learn to send energy to your fist through an act of will, turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off, then when you sit to meditate, you can learn to send it to the spiritual eye. Turn it on, turn it off. And then when you have a job to accomplish in life, you can turn it on, turn it off. It's the same principle. And then what happens over time is the amount of access to universal potential, to energy and understanding grows. Because when you're young, your body can't handle great weights if you're lifting weights. But as your body becomes more mature, you can handle more and more. And what we've seen through in history is that people continue to break boundaries that they had not broken in the past. So the world records and everything continue to push forward. And it's the same in our consciousness. Our world record for accessing divine energy and controlling it, that will continue to develop if we commit ourselves to continue to train. We have to train, and we know in every field there's a point at which people are tempted not to train anymore. It's okay, I've done this for 10 years, I'm done. I've done this for 15 years, I'm done. And if you as you train longer, you get better at training, but you can get bored, you can get distracted, stuff happens, and it's so easy to be swept away in something. So we have to recognize that in the spiritual life, it's till the day that we pass from this world. We are in the training center. And if we are in the training center, are we actually training, or are we sitting on the cushions on the side watching others train? And that's a form of training. When you're sitting on the couch with your feet up and you're watching the world go by, you're learning from that. But what happens is that you may be shrinking your perception. You shrink, and then when you get back out into training, oh man, the muscles. Even though I've been in the training center, I'm out of shape. Because what was I doing at the training center? I had my feet up. But when you see young people come in, and they're so enthusiastic, they're like, and you can go two way. You can go, yeah. I know. They'll get the real picture down, But the other way to see it is to drink that enthusiasm, that youthful enthusiasm, and then you yourself can be energized by it. And these are things, things that it's all about what we do with what we perceive. And if we turn it towards God. We connect more deeply to God. And then it doesn't matter what you're doing. In the beginning, you want to carefully control everything you do in order to make it as spiritually connected as possible so you can learn how it feels to be spiritually connected. But gradually, if that becomes strong enough, then you realize that you can be spiritually connected doing almost anything. And then you realize that it was always available. It's just that you didn't know how to access it before. So as you deepen your access to it, it just gets more and more and more. But you have to commit yourself to it, and then you have to keep at it. And so when I think about this past year, and I could keep looking at all the years of the past, and I go, you end up always, you get up to thankfulness, to appreciation. You go, Lord, thank you for all of the blessings, the opportunities, the insights, the joy. And you can even say thank you for the sore knee and the shoulder, and the ribs, and all of those tumbles that you took. They all added up to you ending having this adventure with God. And you realize that none of the outward differences are the definition of that journey. It's that inner connectedness. It's that inner peace and joy, and that's what makes it. So when you go on a trip with the family, the most important part was the communion that you had with the family, not the things that you actually did. Those things the adventures that you had, brought you together, and you shared in those things. And this is the way to look at life. We're sharing this adventure with God, and God is teaching us to be more consciously aware of what's going on. And eventually we'll see those cars in the back. We'll see those people behind us, all around us, and we'll have this greater perception about what life actually is, instead of thinking that it's only about most ego consciousness, which is their own little self-interests, and to recognize that there's a beautiful dance taking place. And it's diverse. It's got its slow, and it's got its fast, and wild and crazy. And but underneath all of that diversity is oneness, is peace. And so the Christ consciousness, the Katusta Chaitanya, is this peace, this calm awareness of divine presence underneath every life experience. This we want to live in. This is why this season is so important. We emphasize living in this universal presence of spirit in the world, but untouched by it, untouched by limitation. This is how we want to live. And when we live in that Christ presence, then we're free. We may not perceive all of the universal consciousness, but we're free from the world controlling our happiness. And the more free we are in that, the more and more of the divine presence that we'll be consciously aware of.